Okay, so while we're finishing getting the display up there, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. And this is our second to last seminar of our seminar series this year. Our next one is in a month. It's on April 24th, and we're going to have Andrea Chatfield, who is an employment attorney. And she has worked a lot with entrepreneurs, so we've asked her to come and spend some time with us and talk about HR issues that startup companies and young companies, small companies, may need to be thinking about, to be aware of, you might not be aware of, and perhaps you should. Tonight, please don't forget that we have a networking period after the presentation, so we hope that you'll stay and join us for that. And maybe in another month's time we can be doing networking al fresco, but not yet. And before I introduce Marc Sedam, I want to say we started this series back in January 2011, and we've covered various topics over the years. The first few sessions we really looked at intellectual property and defining what it is and how to use that when you're accounting for relationships with other entities. We've done work looking at capital for small businesses, dilutive and non-dilutive capital, fair use in copyright law, Startup 101 crash course. We spent a year talking about innovations in various sectors in New Hampshire that we're seeing tremendous growth in, like medical innovations and medical devices, material science, mobile app development, crowdfunding. And this year we focused on lean startup and business tactics. And we talked about things like identifying minimal viable products, finding your customer, marketing to them. And we'll have tonight's topic on real startups. So our question for you, and to be thinking about, provide some feedback during the networking period or get in touch with us at our office, is what would you like to hear about next year? We're starting to float around some topic ideas. Based on one of our seminars this year, we really thought that social media and perhaps email marketing might be of interest for some of the attendees who have been coming. But we have some other ideas, but we'd really like to know if there are topics that you've heard from us in the past, and it might be nice to have a refresher, like how do you work well with others based on IP and contractual agreements, or if there's some brand new topics that you really wish we could explore and try to find some speakers to come in and share their experiences with you. So if you could give that some thought, let us know, and we'll see what we can do. And with that, I'm going to introduce Marc Sedam, who's the Executive Director of UNHInnovation, and he will talk to us about guerrilla startups. Thank you.
Yeah, so normally I do the introduction, so this is good. So today's going to be we're going to take a little sidetrack from what we normally do. Normally you're here, we give you very heady talks about all these different theories and concepts. I've been wanting to do this for a couple of years. This is basically, okay, so you want to do something new. How can you do it for as little money as humanly possible, get as much done as possible? So this is going to be very, I won't say, this isn't going to be like these big theories of how to do things. It's going to be, how do you build a back office? What kind of accounting software should you use? How do you make the stuff work for you so that you're spending as little money as possible on the operations of your business and more on actually getting customers together? So an hour ago, the entire presentation crashed, and I rebuilt it. So if it's a little scattered, I'm sorry. I got most of the content back. It was one of those rare instances where it was gone, and it was gone. It wasn't kind of gone. We didn't get some of it back. It was just gone. So what you're getting is a stream of consciousness over the last hour. The assumptions today are that you actually want to grow the company reasonably big, and by big I mean more than 3 or 4 people. That you want to have, that you need some coordination, that you need some kind of size and scope. The stuff I'm going to go over is my experience, things I've used. I'm not paid by any. I will name specific companies and specific programs and things that work well. I'm not getting $1 from any of them, trust me. So if you know of something that you've used that works better, by all means, jump up and shout. So we start with the wow, I have an idea. And first thing people want to do is I got to go talk to a lawyer. No, you really don't. Even if it's a really good idea, you still shouldn't talk to your lawyer. What you should do is think about first. So I'm thinking this whole thing is about saving you money. I know this seems stupid to say, Google your idea. But you'd be amazed at how many thousands of dollars are spent by somebody who is convinced that they're right and hasn't really done a thorough search, only to find 5, 6, 10 months later that another company is doing the exact same thing and doing it better and already in the market. The attorneys and patent attorneys will tell you they have a litany of unpaid bills from customers who were working up things that they had done. If you haven't searched on your idea for at least 8 hours, spent a full day, ideally over more than one day, then you're not doing it right. In fact, usually what I'll suggest to people is you do your search, explain to somebody else what you think the idea is, and have a friend of yours do the search for you, because most people have blind spots on their ideas. So they're using certain search terms, they're approaching the market a certain way, and changing a word or two often leads to a remarkable amount of things. You find out that, no, you're not the first person in the world to think about it. So, great. So, there's no hits, so you're a millionaire. You've made a ton of money. Well, maybe. Okay. So all that's established is you have an idea. It doesn't seem like anybody else is doing it. But ideas are a dime a dozen. Ideas are actually worthless. Execution of ideas are very valuable. And businesses around successful execution of ideas do make people millionaires. So I suggest, as I've always suggested, as was the theme of the year, to get the book Business Model Generation. So here's the first amount of money you have to spend, $19.74 on Amazon. Buy the book, don't get the ebook. This is the kind of thing that you need in front of you. It's got pretty pictures. It's not very wordy. It's not a book on entrepreneurship. It's a book on creating business models. So why do we do this? One, it's one of the tenets of the lean startup approach. But the whole purpose of the book is to put your idea in the context of the world. So to put your idea in the context of what makes it valuable, what customer segment is it valuable to, how are you going to deliver it, what channel are you going to use, what kind of relationships are you going to have? Are you going to be a direct-to-consumer provider, or do you have to get a distributor? Where are your costs going to be? Are there people that can defray your costs? So I recommend the book very strongly. The idea is that you talk to 100 people about your idea before you actually do anything. The reason it's 100 is that's enough that, a lot of, apologies to offend any engineers in the room, you talk to 10 people and they'll agree with you, then you're right. Well, chances are you talk to 10 of your friends, they think the way you do. Going out and talking to 100 people, it's very rare that you find that 100 people are your personal friends. So if you get around and you talk to 100 people, you'll generally get different perspectives, different approaches, and you'll get feedback on things that you hadn't seen. The other reason I'm really borderline evangelical about the book and the process is that I went back and looked at the company that I was running before I came to UNH and estimated that if I had used this approach of looking at the customers, trying to find the customers, that I would have saved about $3 million of somebody else's money. Now, the good news is it wasn't my money, so, there's that, but that doesn't make you feel very good at night when you realize you could have saved a lot of money. I guess for UNH, if I'd saved $3 million, I'd still be there, so there you go. So $3 million of somebody else's money worth spent so that I'm here. Okay, so you have your idea, you've looked through a business model. Seems like, maybe there's something here. Happens a lot is people can't even build the damn thing, right? Well, I have a great idea, I don't know what to do with it. There is this remarkable site called Elance. If you've never used Elance, you should use Elance. So even this simple thing is somebody says, well, I don't know how to build a website. Throw it on Elance. I don't know how to deliver a web app. Somebody up there will do it. Elance is basically a job board for freelancers. Tends to be very IT heavy, but you can get a lot of things done on there. So prior to UNH, Qualist, prior to that, I tried to start a video editing company. It's a long story. And at the time, video editing on the fly was really hard. It just was very data intensive. There weren't really, the H.264 codec hadn't really been agreed to as the standard. And so you had to decide how you were going to loop the video based on the software. And so we decided to use Adobe, which at the time was using a program called Flex with Flash. So Flex helped you modify the video. Very esoteric language. And we wanted to build an entire website on Adobe Flash video edited by Flex on the fly. So literally, somebody post a video and you could pick anywhere in the video that you wanted to go. It's a very esoteric problem. We thought we couldn't do it. We posted the thing up on Elance, and within 3 weeks and $1,300, we had a fully functioning prototype website. It was some guy in Uzbekistan. I've never met him. Bless his heart. But it worked. And I took that prototype and took it around to a couple venture capitalists to show that it could be done, and got to the point of getting a term sheet for $500,000 investment, which was supposed to lead to $10 million of investment, which eventually led to nothing, but so be it. But for $1,300, I went from, this is really cool, damn, that's a really hard problem, oh, here's my prototype. So now we're at $19.47 plus or minus $1,300 for your prototype. Okay, so maybe you feel like you have something and you feel like you have a real business, and so everybody wants to, okay, we're going to start a business. Well, what does starting a business mean? To the state, all it means is that you filed your incorporation papers. Nothing more, nothing less. So if you want to exist, that moment of creation, $100 and that link, you can incorporate your company. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need anything to get your incorporation papers. Now, one of the problems is all that does is create a structure. It creates an incorporated entity. It doesn't do anything else. When you think of a company has articles of incorporation, bylaws, ways of being, how you vote. Those things are not included. For $100, you basically get the right to exist. If you want to actually operate, it is probably best to hire an attorney. I know, and again, attorneys in the room, besides the ones on staff? No. Tristan won't say yes anymore. He's learned. No, I'm kidding. Divine Milmet will do all of the incorporation for free as part of their startup package. Other attorneys, firms around do similar things, fixed costs. It shouldn't cost you more than $2,000 to do that, to get a real law firm, corporate law firm, to set up your incorporation, to set up all your papers, to do everything. It's really money well spent because it's a little hard to do this stuff on the fly. Yeah?
Good time to toss in an alternative to that? Or,
sure.
I've done this and used an online company called LegalZoom.
Yeah.
It does all kinds of the simpler things that a lawyer might help you with.
Right. So LegalZoom, that's a...
$100, I think.
Yeah, that's not a bad alternative. The reason why you'd even think about this, right? We haven't made a product yet. We just have a prototype. Why, Mark, why are you talking about incorporating? It's too soon. Okay. One of the reasons it may not be too soon is in order for you to get a bunch of other free stuff, you need an employee identification number. So you need an EIN or Fed tax ID number. So sometimes you kind of have to be forced to incorporate, because if you don't, you can't get free things. So in the class that I'm teaching now, a group of students wants to get blanks for pharmaceutical pills. They want to build like a natural product that they want to put in those little gel caps. And if they had an employee ID number, they could get 1,000 capsules for free. If they didn't have one, they'd have to spend $5,600 to buy 300,000 of them. And that doesn't make any sense. So here's an easy way to just incorporate and get it. You don't have to do it. It may be too early for you, but sometimes you find when you go and you try to go to some of this other software and back office stuff that I talk about, the first thing they ask you is your EIN number, because that's their way of seeing that you're real and you're not just sniffing around trying to get something free. So $100. Okay. So now, maybe you exist, maybe you have something interesting. Where do I work? May I suggest the ABI Hub? It's lovely, lots of things to do. It could be a big, vibrant place if you all were here running your businesses in it. So co-working spaces are really good places to get started. $50, $100 a month, depending on what you want. You don't have to go and get a big, massive office. Usually, the best part is like the Wi-Fi is free. So, for $50 a month, you go to a place where somebody else is going to be paying attention. You're going to have Wi-Fi. You're going to have other people around you who are doing things that are like you. It's a really good place to start. Obviously, this is one. There are other ones, but I refuse to mention them because you're here. So let's go to software. So productivity software. This is a place where there's actually, believe it or not, a lot of discussion about what to use. So bottom line is, if you're going to be a real organization, you need some kind of productivity software. So they tended in the past to be very expensive. So if you want to get the Office suite, Office Premier, Professional, the kind of Office that if you worked in a big company you had, it was like $400 or $500. So there became these other alternatives, openoffice.org, which is all free. So for OpenOffice, they have word processing, they have Excel, or a spreadsheet software, they have a presentation software. They work okay, and they're backwards compatible to Microsoft Office, which is helpful sometimes because not everybody is kind of nerded out on OpenOffice. But that's free. Google Docs is free. Some people love Google Docs, some people hate it. I hate it. I don't know why, I just don't like it at all. Apple now has removed the cost of all of their productivity software. So if you buy an Apple device, an iPad, a MacBook, they throw in their productivity software for free. But then there's Office. And the reality is that Office still has 85% market penetration. So you can not like Office, believe that software should be free, hate Microsoft, whatever your reason is. If you're going to work with anybody else, chances are they're working with Office. So it's one of those nice in theory, more challenging in practice to avoid Microsoft right now. They've been dropping the prices. They're about $70 a year for some of it. They're now putting a lot of the stuff online. So it's like Microsoft Office, like Google Docs. So all the storage is in the cloud. You can share a bunch of stuff. And again, the reality is, when you go and work with another company and you want to share a PO, you put a document back and forth, you want to work on proposals, you want to do edits of contracts, the other software doesn't really do as good of a job. You lose edits a lot of times, you can't tell who made the changes, and it's sort of the de facto standard for lawyers and other folks. So there's that. Yeah.
Comment on OpenOffice. I'm not sure if anybody else has experience with that. I got kind of frustrated with it and stopped using it, went back to Microsoft Office. But then I've heard that I think the lead developers of OpenOffice sort of branched off and started another Office suite called LibreOffice.
Right.
And I'd be interested if anybody has experience with that. I haven't used it much yet.
I heard about it, but I couldn't find enough on it to say it one way or another.
What's the name?
Zebra Office?
Libra.
Oh, Libra.
L-I-B-R-E.
Oh, I thought it was.
As in free.
Oh. Free and unused, apparently. So there you go. OK, so you have an idea. You think you have a business. You have a place to work. You have something to write, to tell people about it. Place in small business people forget a lot is CRM. So contact relationship management. Basically, how do you keep track of your customers? There are a couple major ones. Salesforce is the dominant CRM. Again, it integrates really well with Microsoft Office. It's very flexible. Some of the other tools I'm going to talk about works great with those too. Sugar CRM has come up pretty quickly as I think it was started in Kickstarter, but is this more of a, I won't say open source, but more of a less proprietary backbone for CRM. And then there's this other program called Zoho CRM, which is really compatible with the Google suite of things. And what we'll talk about at the very end is a lot of times, in the beginning, you kind of have to pick the ecosystem that you're interested in working on. So if you're an Apple person, decide you're going to pick Apple, and then pick stuff that fits with the workflow that you like to do. If you love Google, then pick things that work great with Google, because it will save you a lot of time in the end. Yeah.
There's another great one called Base CRM.
Base?
Base
Okay.
CRM, yeah. It's free.
See, free is good. What I've seen about a lot of the free ones is that they'll have something really important missing. Like, you can track all of your customers and all your contacts, but you can't track an opportunity. You can't track a project. You can't
do forecasting.
Right.
Right, so it's $15 a month to go up to
Right.
that set. But it's a lot cheaper than Salesforce.com
Yeah.
and a lot less complex.
Yes, yeah.
And it integrates well with mobile devices. It's all cloud-based. So.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, similarly, there's a product called Civi CRM, which is open source, highly flexible, has a huge community surrounding it, international community surrounding it, doing a ton of development.
Yeah.
Integrates well with other tools. Civi, C-I-V-I, CRM.
Okay. And see, here's the philosophy, right? So you have folks, so are you in the software side?
No.
So hardware, or are you? Okay. And so some people respond, the reason I was asking was I was making the assumption that when somebody says open source, that tends to almost create its own community. Like, we're just going to work with open source software because it feels better and because there's a lot more flexible and you can do all those things. But if you're like me, who can turn a computer on and off and apparently write 40 slides in an hour. That's all I got. I'm not interested in all that stuff. I just want to do, I'm the it just works kind of guy, which is why you see a lot of brushed aluminum. But then there's a whole another set of folks who say, I want to be able to do everything. I want to tweak it and turn it and fork it and do whatever I want to do with it so that it's flexible and it's perfect for just me. And that's fine.
You can get Elance to take care of your
That's right.
CRM.
It's true. It is true. You can get them to build reports. So this gets ignored a lot because you start thinking about, you're talking to people and you're communicating with people, and then especially if it's you and 3 friends and a bunch of coffee and 5 hours of sleep at night, and you're kind of racing at this stuff. And Alex isn't here, but he's a great example of working on a nonprofit, running around, getting a lot of work done, but tracking all of the information becomes a challenge. Then all of a sudden you forget who you talked to. You forget what you said to them. You forget what you offered them. You forget if you actually sold them something or not, or you promised to sell them something by a certain amount of time. So I'm a big fan of CRMs, and that basically you can't afford not to have one. And some of these, like you mentioned, Civi is free for a little while. So when you're small and you can't afford anything, go with free. But if you pick free, pick something that scales with you, so that when you grow into the point that you might need those other things, you might need forecasting and tracking opportunities, that it can grow with you and that you don't have to change platforms midstream. So I learned this the hard way in a struggling startup company. Port your data back to your desktop once a month. Because they're in the cloud, and the cloud is awesome, and the cloud solves the world, right? Well, if you don't have access to the cloud because you don't pay your bills, the cloud becomes your enemy because all of your data is out in the cloud somewhere on a server that isn't yours. So the only way to get your data back when you don't pay your bills is to pay your bill. So it sounds cheeky, but sometimes $600 a year is a lot of money to a startup company, and you can't afford the $600, and all of a sudden you find out that 10,000 contacts is on the other side of that check. And so even though you don't want to pay for it anymore, you have to pay for it to get your data back. So we did that once. Obviously, I have some firsthand experience with this. And then from that point on, created a monthly port of our data back. That way, if we ever got stuck again and had a cash flow problem, we at least knew who we talked to. So from me to you, it's a gift. OK, so let's talk about the back office. And by the back office, I mean, all right, maybe unfortunately, you've matured beyond the ABI hub. You need your own space. There's stuff you want to do for yourself. Most people will just say, all right, well, I'm at wherever, 25 Madbury. I need to call my cable company. I need to call my telecom company. I'm going to call Verizon because I don't know who else is there. Right? That's a great way to spend a lot of money you don't need to spend. So there's this trio of companies, which actually happens to be the same company. I didn't know this until after I used them as a client. They were in my backyard in North Carolina. They basically go out, since broadband is a commodity product, right, Scott? We've just made it a commodity product on some level, working harder. There's no reason that you have to pay your local vendor for these things. So broadband.com will go out and will shop for broadband for you. So when I was in Research Triangle, we were paying something like, I think $1,100 a month for some pretty heavy duty broadband because we were swapping a lot of data. And they went out, we just called them up and said, here's our plan, here's our location. And they came back with 3 other service providers who were going to give it to us for at least 60% less than we were paying. And it was just because they bid it out. And they said, oh, well, we have a line going right past there, we'll hook you up. So we went from, and a lot of times you're going to get like an off-brand broadband provider, your ISP, or not the ISP, what's the other initials that's in that process? Is it the ISP? Who's providing the line to your, yeah, I'm blanking on the name. So, right, that's what I was thinking, your local exchange. So you go to the internet and you search for Verizon, right? But you don't have to. There's all these little tiny companies that are connecting things back and forth. So the broadband will go out, you give them your address and it'll tell you who provides service, and they'll go out and they'll shop for the best price. So in one phone call, we saved $600 a month. It's a lot to scratch. On top of that, they have phone booth, which as you grow beyond your mobile device, and you want to feel like you're an actually big company. They do, it's called virtual PBX, which means they'll do an entire bank of phones. So the entire ABI hub could be on this system. The phones are there, they're hard lines, and yes, we're still at the point where hardwired phones matter. But the backbone of it all is virtual. So you don't even have a trunk in your closet anymore. It's all going over that same broadband pipe. And so you could light up a phone number or have a phone number hop from a call comes into your phone, hops to your mobile, you're not there, it goes back to somebody else's phone. And they wire the stuff all up for you. It's pretty neat. And it was like we dumped our local telco provider where we were paying whatever the equivalent of AT&T was in our office. We dumped them and saved another $500 a month. You do have to buy the handsets, but it's cheaper. And then bandwidth is the third piece of this puzzle, and they will actually coordinate everything together and include mobile phones. And Bandwidth owns Republic Wireless, which is like a little scrappy mobile company that piggybacks on Sprint's network. So now you can have one organization that's got your broadband, it's got your phones, and then actually connects down to your mobile device. It's all managed on the same system, so they're basically using, since they're selling you everything, it's very, very inexpensive. So just in doing this, we wound up saving $600 or $500. We never used the wireless piece because they brought them later, but we saved $1,100 a month by just making a phone call. That was cool. It meant that we could pay Salesforce to get our data back. So anyway. Okay, so we talked about that. They do have some pretty interesting features, like you can create an auto attendant, so it sounds like you have an administrative assistant up front fielding phone calls. It's all very nice. They play pretty music in the background, so it makes you feel like a big person. All right, now then there's the storage issue. So when I was trying to start a company before, the one I was talking about, the video editing company, to move a terabyte up and down was ridiculous. I mean, it would cost us $10,000 or something to move a terabyte around, and it became a real problem. Now, storage is nothing. So you have Box or Dropbox on your device. They're free for like 5 gigs of storage or whatever the number is. It's a great place to back up things like presentations that crash. And they also tend, as you see, they work within the ecosystem that you've picked. So you have Google Drive for the Google stuff, Microsoft SkyDrive for Microsoft, Amazon Web Solutions, Web Services is sort of the back office for most major data sharing. It's the back end of Dropbox for sure, and it might be for Box as well. But these are great things. So instead of having, you used to have a company and have a server rack to store and back up your stuff. And Gretchen's smiling because she remembers tape drives and things earlier than tape drives. See, now it's effectively for like $9 a month, you can back all of that stuff up and never think about it again. Especially like when you do email, backing up the email to your server is really helpful. It's also great for security because you put everything up, you back up everything to the cloud, and then if somebody quits, you can shut them off on the fly rather than needing the box. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about accounting software. Again, the dominant force is QuickBooks. And you should be, the second that you start spending money, you should get accounting software. I've had people say, well, I'm not pulling a paycheck, so I don't need QuickBooks. Well, you're spending money. Eventually what happens is 6-8 months from now when something good happens and you say, oh, I'm really going to light this business up. And then you find out you have to go that first year and file your taxes is like the worst experience in the world because now you're trying to find every dollar that you spent, trying to figure it all out. It's just easier to use. The other reason to do it is it works. QuickBooks works, first of all, it'll do your payroll, which is important. It'll also work with Salesforce. So you can do things like send out a PO in Salesforce, which will import into QuickBooks, which will show up as an opportunity, which is something you can manage. So they work very closely together. There are some other ones. There's Peachtree you pay for. There are a bunch of small ones that are free. But what you'll find, again, is they're missing a couple of really key. So I went and in the slide deck that Microsoft ate, there were 5 or 6 other examples of accounting software, but all of them had one fatal flaw. So it was like, it's great, so it can manage your receivables and your payables and your receivables, but you couldn't create a purchase order out of it. Well, that's hard because then you have to create the purchase order in Word and then put it in the accounting software. or it wouldn't create an invoice, or it wouldn't create a 1099. Well, if you're a small company and you don't have employees, guess what? Everybody you work with is on a 1099. So at the end of the year, you then have to go hire an accountant to do all of your 1099s, where if you just spent $50, your accounting software would have done it for you. So this is my other favorite one, right? Any accountants in the room? Excellent. OK. So the other reason you buy accounting software is to play vendor roulette. This is how you actually make money from your vendors. So doesn't seem fair, but life isn't fair. What do you want me to tell you? So vendor roulette, very simple. Figure out the stuff you need to buy. Find 3 to 4 vendors that will buy it for you. Pay the bill, buy small amounts the first couple months, pay the bills on time. When you're really ready to spend money, then you rotate. You buy from vendor 1 in January, vendor 2 in March, vendor 3 in April, vendor 4 in May. And then you wait to pay vendor 1 until April. So you're not paying them for 90 days. And then you pay your bill. Well, vendor 2, 3, and 4, you've spent money with all of them, and you just haven't paid them. So they're floating you the entire way. Then you go back and you pay vendor 2. You've ordered from vendor 1 again. And you vendor vendor 3, and you order from vendor 2 again. If you do that, we actually freed up $25,000 in operating capital a month by swapping our vendors. And usually what happens is one of them will catch on and they'll squawk. And 120 days doesn't work, so there's 60 days. So it gets a little more confusing. But usually you can find at least 3 vendors that will allow you to stretch your payment to 90. And that's the magic number, because that's easy to remember. You pay them once a quarter, you buy once a quarter. And so it's a great way to free operating cash up. So if you don't have any money and you need $15,000 a month in stuff, but you can only afford to pay 5, you spread it across 3 people. And you've just freed up $10,000 in cash. I got really good at that one. There are still people that won't talk to me, but I eventually paid. Everyone eventually got paid. May have had to threaten me. But anyway, just mentioning this thing about office equipment, because Maria made a comment before we were here. Even though the tendency when you're small is to rent everything, just buy it. Afford to buy it. Because we had the only perk, no pun intended, that we had at my last company was a coffee maker. See, it was a funny joke. And it was nice. We called it the Caffeinator 3000. It was this big giant machine from Starbucks that would grind a fresh cup of coffee and do a fresh French press every time you pressed a button. So it was like a bunch of Pavlov's dogs. So you'd hear that, and people would just start walking out of their offices. And it was great, and the coffee was delicious. And believe it or not, it actually made us look good. When we were like scrappy and we had nothing else, we would you like a cup of coffee? Boop, boop, boop. Oh, but my goodness, look at that thing. So we would rent it for $60 a month, which, $60 a month is pretty good to have that out there. But then realized 4 years later that we had spent something like $5,000 on the coffee machine. And we asked them how much it would cost to buy. They're like, oh, it was like $1,400. Like, oh, shit. So even if you can save up and scrap to buy those things like copiers and coffee makers and stuff, and then go to BJ's and do it. So we were paying $60 a month for the coffee maker and $17 a pound for the coffee. So it was the razor blade thing. And it was Starbucks, right? So it was fine coffee, but it wasn't $17 a pound fine coffee. So we just started going to Costco and buying Starbucks, not telling the vendor. They're like, your coffee intake has gone down a lot. I'm like, yes, it has. We hired new people. No one likes coffee anymore. So we were filling the top with the Starbucks from Costco. So eventually we wound up buying the machine, and then it broke. So there's your lesson. So couldn't fix it because no one could fix the Caffeinator 3000. We had a little wake for it. It was very sad. Okay. Okay, so you've got the back office, you've got things moving, you have the capacity to be real. You still need to do professional services, meaning HR and accounting and insurance and all that stuff. New Hampshire's not so great at that, meaning there aren't a lot of vendors for this, but you can outsource all this stuff. So you can hire one company who will do your HR, who will do your accounting, and who will be a vendor for your insurance. So you don't have to, although Obamacare has taken care of some of that insurance shopping, there's still an ability to shop for insurance and get a better rate. Because you don't need a full-time accountant for years, until that accountant basically saves you so much money that it doesn't make sense to outsource it. A lot of small companies get suckered into usually by their attorneys, nothing personal for those watching on the video someday, to doing an audit because it feels good to have an audit. Like, you should have an audit. How do you know that you're not doing anything wrong? You need an audit. Well, audit's like 25 grand. We got suckered into an audit by our attorneys. And so we spent $75,000 over 3 years, each, 25 a year for 3 years, getting this audit that basically said we were within 1% of what QuickBooks said, just to make ourselves feel better. While we were running out of money, while we were firing people because we didn't have any money to pay them because we were paying the auditors. So we just stopped. And the auditors went, why? No, that's bad. And they said, you're fired. We'll call you in 3 years. If we raise money, we'll get an audit. And that's always what people say, well, if you need to raise capital, you need an audit. Sort of. I mean, if you're raising money from a big VC firm, yes, they want an audit. Well, guess what? If you have the ability to raise $5 million, then spending the 20 grand is a risk worth taking. You might take that risk. In fact, you might say, we'll get the audit after you invest in us. And you can reduce the amount of money you give us if the audit is flaky. So don't get an audit. Just get a good bookkeeper, have an accountant, have a CPA look over your numbers once a year. You'll be fine. OK, so let's talk lawyers. Believe it or not, most corporate lawyers, this is true in this state too, know that you don't have any money. And they really want to help. If you start every conversation with, you're not charging me, are you? They're not going to help you anymore. Or they're just going to try to be like, actually, yes, I am, because you're annoying and I don't want to deal with you anymore. So it's easier to start off the discussion with an attorney and say, look, I've got $3,000. That's all I have. I've budgeted $3,000 to work with you. That's all I can afford. There isn't anything after that. What kind of relationship can we have? I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And most of them will negotiate with you about what you can expect from that. It means if you only have $3,000 that you can't call them up every 5 minutes asking what you should do. As is put in the end, it's not their job to afford you, it's your job to afford them. So you have to have reasonable expectations of how you're dealing with them. So this was much better thought out in my other presentation too. But for patent lawyers, so we manage the university's IP. I'm very sensitive to the issue of how expensive patents are. But they're only expensive because most people put the burden of the patent filing on the attorney. Walk in the door and say, here's my idea. Is it patentable? Well, that's a $5,000 question because we're going to have to do some work. We're going to have to do some research. We're going to have to search some prior art. I don't know. So you're paying an attorney the time to answer a question that you should be able to answer. So how many of you took science in high school? You remember the lab report, right? So a patent is a lab report. That's all it is. You have your abstract, you have background, materials and methods, results, and a conclusion. The only part that you need an attorney for is the conclusion, which are the claims. Don't mess with the claims, because if you get sued, they look at the claims. So have the attorney work on the claims. But you could write an abstract. You can write a background. You can do a prior art search. Google Patents is actually really good in terms of searching that. You can use the regular Google search bar and say, what else is in this area? You can draft the results that you think you've received and the conclusion that you think you've made. And I did this for that startup I keep talking about. And we did people think of patents in terms of number of pages. So we did like a 53-page patent application for $2,200 because I wrote everything. And when I went to the attorney, I said, all right, I wrote everything. Look it over and just copy edit it. Use a junior attorney to copy edit it and put it into patentees. And then you write the claims. So I spent 8 hours. I paid for 8 hours of his time to write the claims and review the patent. Was filed, was a good-looking application. I wish we could get our faculty to do that, but it's asking a little much. So a lot of times when we're on the fence about whether it's worth filing or stuff, I will actually turn around and ask the faculty to do more of the work, because at least we can save some money that way. So yeah, we talked about that. And if you're an attorney, I cost you money, I apologize. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about healthcare. So Obamacare solved some of that, some of it, not all of it, some of it. A lot of people make the mistake of not offering healthcare because they can't afford it. My line is you can't afford not to have healthcare, and that's on you too. Even if you're a sole proprietor, you need healthcare, because if you get hurt, your business goes away if you don't have healthcare. If you get hurt and you have healthcare, you have the opportunity to recover without it liquidating what remains of your assets, and you have a chance to get back again. So I'm going to tell you the story of Qualys, the last company I was at. So from 2007 to 2011, when I managed our healthcare, the average annual cost increase was 24% a year. I made the entire cost over that same period 3%. Not annually, total, 3%. How? One, I actually asked questions. It's amazing how much the increases in premiums in healthcare happen because no one asks them not to happen. You know, if you had a business and you raised your prices by 30% and your customers didn't leave, wouldn't you do that? I would. I aspire to that, you know. So just putting a little competition in it helps. And so what we did, and in a small company, it's a little easier than a big company, but every year I would do the same thing. We had an outsourced person who dealt with healthcare. So they would go out and they'd get the kind of average premiums from Aetna and from Harvard Pilgrim and whatever, the Blue Cross and all that stuff. And I would sit down at the table in the conference room and I'd put all the plans out together. And then we would bring the entire staff in and we'd say, okay, what's important to you this year? Do you want better dental coverage or do you want a lower deductible in healthcare? Do you want a higher deductible in healthcare and you want free this? Do you want a health savings account and a higher deductible in your healthcare plan? And we just put it up in a big matrix and move the numbers around. So some years our dental coverage was awesome. Some years our dental coverage was average. But if it went from awesome to average, it meant that we got better in some other place. And so we just moved stuff around. And I would rather have, and sometimes we hopped plans. And some people got annoyed by that, but the reality is most, in any place that has a reasonable number of people, the docs take multiple plans. So if you go from Blue Cross to Prudential, you're not really losing anything. And for us, it was simple. We looked at the employees and said, do you want to pay $300 more a month or do you want to switch healthcare plans? They'd be like, well, it's amazing how many people want to switch their plans when it's going to cost them $300 a month. The other thing to do is to pay attention to the 5s and 0s. That means somebody turns 25, 35, 45, or 30, 40, 50, 60. When you click the 5s and 0s, your premiums tend to go up. So every time you have somebody hit a 5, that portion of the coverage goes up. Every time they hit a 0, that portion of the coverage goes up. So you can actually look out and look at all your employees and see when they're going to hit those things and manage around those numbers. So you can, maybe when, because sometimes you can get better coverage when you buy 2 or 3, where you commit to 2 or 3 years at a time. So we had, the way our payroll worked one year was we had a bunch of people turning 50. And so when they were 49, you're allowed to say this, Gretchen, she's grimacing, you're allowed to say it. So when they were 49, we bought 3-year plans that would carry us through good premiums when they were 50, 51, and 52. And we could use the savings of those things to go back and to spend on other things. It takes a little time, but again, we went from a 24% increase every year to a 3% increase total over the same 4-year period. We saved about $75,000, which was a month of payroll. So everybody rather would be paid for another month than to go through the inconvenience of having the discussion. So your spending money on your credit card. So a lot of people will just take out their personal card and say, I'm starting a company. Honey, I'm really sorry, the credit card bill is going to go up. Bad idea. Every bank has a credit card with a reward system. Again, these are simple things, but it's a good way to save you money and actually help your employees out. So we would go and we went to RBC Bank and asked for the card with the best rewards. So we paid $30 a year per card, but we got, I think it was $1, for every $2 we spent, we got $1 in rewards. So with a company of 10 people, we were spending $30,000 or $40,000 a year. So we were getting a lot of these points that we could use to redeem for stuff. So we took all the points together as we were all running around trying to get customers, and once a year we would redeem them for gifts for the staff. So one year everybody got a $300 Best Buy gift card. And we just said, we can't give you $300, but we spent money that gave us the ability to give you $300, and the $300 was free. So you could ignore that and just take whatever you have or have it go in airline miles, which is the worst value for the dollar, by the way, and use that to buy things that would reward the staff or would reward the company. Like I bought myself one year after I'd traveled 150,000 miles, I bought myself a pair of noise-canceling headphones. Okay, I wouldn't have reached in my pocket for that, but I was able to use the points to do that. If you're taking in money, this thing is fuzzy again. If you're taking in money, Square has sort of changed the world, which is that little tiny device that sits on the top of mobile phones, where it used to be if you wanted to start a business, if you were an artist and you wanted to sell your stuff, you had to process a credit, or you couldn't take a credit card, you had to take cash. You'd go and try to sell your wares wherever you are. Somebody would say, well, I only have a credit card, you lose the sale. With Square, I want to say it's like $29 to get it. It plugs into the headphone jack of your phone or your iPad, and you can take credit card payments right off the bat. You just swipe the card, boom, you take money. If I had had this at Qualist, when we were doing things $3,000 and $4,000 at a time, they had P cards. We could have actually taken the sale right off the bat and swiped the card while they were there. And it's something like a quarter for every swipe and 1.75% of the total cost. So if you think about the loss of a sale, I mean, even if you were doing something like selling your own art, and you had a sculpture that was $600, the $1.7 or the 1.75% that you're getting that, which is what, $6 plus the 25 cents. So say you spend $7 to take the swipe. Well, you just made $593 instead of losing the sale. So these are, and it's cheap, it's easy. It too works with QuickBooks, it works with Peachtree, it works with Salesforce, it works with POs. You can make all those things sing together. So it's a great way to take, even for companies that you don't think, you're not in a retail environment where you're thinking about credit cards. A lot of big companies that give, for folks that need to buy stuff, they actually have credit cards to keep track of the purchases. So why would you ignore the fact that you could take their money on the spot, then wait to put out a PO? I would have loved to have those. I would have been rattling people's cages for these. So the next couple slides I'm going to go through kind of quick, only because there's a lot of content on them and we're getting close to 5 o'clock. The other new thing that has come out in the last couple of years that's really useful are these email services, email marketing. And they're good for a couple of different reasons. And Chelsea did all these slides. She's in the back. She refused to be in the front. So one is, again, these email services work with the Microsoft Suite, work with Google Docs, work with Salesforce, work with all these things. So you can make this all, you can send out an email blast and then know in your CRM who all is getting the email. But also the second one is the big one. If you do all of this emailing through your own account, often you get picked up as a spammer. And then your email will not get through. And we had a situation where our marketing person at my old company was sending out a bunch, and sure enough, he got hit as a spammer. And so we had to call each of our customers and say, no, you got to unblock us. So they didn't block him, they unblocked the whole company. So then I was sending them information about data that they were owed, and all of our emails were bouncing back because we had been flagged as a spamming organization. So these things stop that from happening. There are a few, you can see free, $20 a month, $15 a month. I think we use MailChimp right now, right? So if you're here, you have responded to MailChimp, so that's good. These are good charts. We'll post them up online so you can look at them for more. They have lots of different features. Usually the freer you get, as we already talked to you get a stripped down version. You can't track stuff. If you want to send unlimited emails a month, you can't use MailChimp. If you're sending 2 or 3 a month, it's a good way to use it. I like the first line, Chelsea. It's free for life. Has almost every feature you want. That sounds good. There's Reach Mail, Constant Contacts, one that's done so well they actually advertise on the Super Bowl. So there's pricing for all these other things. And then if you want to go free, there's a couple free options for email communications, and then some other paid services. iContact is the one that I've used before, which help you do tracking, help you look at metrics and data. So again, if you're like us and you want people to show up, you're all here. This join our email list, adding things to how you acquire customers, making sure they have an option to get the next contact. So if you see the email, join our list, click. Well, you just gained another customer. It's cheap and free. I'm going to skip through this. Okay, here's my favorite thing for making money for very little, making a lot of money for very little money, and that's hosting events, like this one. You're here. We could not market effectively to each of you individually any more than you sitting here and hearing what we have to say. This week it happens to be me, but we try to bring in smart people who have lots of stuff to say. So it's a really inexpensive way to acquire customers. And I think of them as reverse trade shows. If you go to a trade show, you're one person in 1,000 and you're wandering around trying to get an attention. When you host an event, everybody's coming to you. So by virtue of you sitting here, you are probably on some level our customer because you have chosen to come and hear the things that we have to say. So we used to do these all the time. We'd pay usually they cost about $1,800 a pop. And I was in the pharmaceutical industry. So we would get 70 of the top pharma researchers in San Francisco to show up once every 6 months to hear presentations on the science that we were offering. We didn't give the presentations. We let our customers give them. So we host the event. We pay for the booze. Our customers say how great we are. And then all of a sudden, we're all that anybody's talking about. It works good. Free food and drink, always a plus. Give people something. But the key for me, whether trade shows or events, is if the cost of hosting is more than the cost of getting that customer, the value of the customer, it's not worth doing. So here, this is obviously paying into the system, but we do hope some of you will eventually license technology. If it's going to cost you $2,000 to do an event or go to a trade show, and the likelihood is you'll get 2 customers out of it, each of whom will pay you $300 a year, you're spending $2,000 to make $600. That doesn't make any sense. So a lot of people don't make that calculation of what it costs to acquire a customer. So we use Eventbrite. Lots of people use Eventbrite. Again, Eventbrite works with Google, works with Microsoft, works with your CRM. All of these things work together. Facebook, all that noise. Pricing is very inexpensive. If you have a free event, like this is free, everything's free. If you have a paid event, they take a very small amount of money. So it's a 2.5% plus $1 per ticket. So if you want to charge $10 per ticket, Eventbrite is a little expensive. If you want to charge $50, it's relatively inexpensive. Got about 5 minutes left. So talk a little bit about trade shows. A lot of people that have started companies, especially university startups, they've got the customers, they got all this stuff set up, they think it's going to work, they know that they're in the market, and so they immediately go and say, well, we got to spend $5 grand to go to American Chemical Society because that's where everybody's going to be. So trade shows make sense if all of your customers go, not your competitors, but your customers. If your competitors are there, it doesn't matter because you have nobody to sell to. If your customers are there, it might make some sense. You do, and of course I forgot today, you must bring tchotchkes. You must bring the squishy hockey puck that we sell. You must bring pens. Everyone says they're stupid, right? And then there's this compulsion. You leave a trade show, you're like, why do I have all this stuff I don't need? But you pick them up, and there's a brand there, and it makes sense. The folks, Maria's gone already, but the folks on the staff laughed at me when I said, Tristan, squeezy hockey pucks. And they all humored me because I was going to spend the money anyway. Let's get squeezy hockey pucks. All right. We took the squeezy hockey pucks out. Huge success. People just took them. You know what? We went 250 hockey pucks gone in about an hour and a half, 2 hours, because people take them. So don't give up the opportunity for somebody else to take something with your brand on it. That would be silly. So what it cost us like $200 or something like that for 200. Yeah, so, but we have every time we get them, we bring them out, they disappear. In fact, we started to have to ration them to events. When I was at Qualist, we dealt with human hepatocytes, so we had a squeezy liver. Seems disgusting. Who would want to squeeze a liver all day? Every single person at the trade show wanted a squeezy liver. So some of them were collecting squeezy bodies because they had the brains and the intestines were really gross. But this was the last piece of their squeezy tchotchke body. But we couldn't keep the things. We put them on the table. I'd walk away for 10 minutes. They'd all be gone. So very helpful. Don't do it. Oops. Sorry. So don't do it if you don't even know what the market is. If you feel like you have to because you don't, save your money. And if you don't have enough money to look impressive, the worst thing you can do, it's better not to go than to be the person that doesn't have a booth or a table drape and puts like you went to Kinko's and printed out the one thing that you know and you spread them all out so it looks like you have a lot of things to say, you just have the one thing. Yeah, that person is sad and pathetic, so don't be that person. I was going to look for a picture where I was that person, where all these booths are around us and there's our little lame booth with like 3 livers on it because I didn't care, but I felt like I had to go. I've regretted it ever since. If you're doing gifts for trade shows, which are good, like how do you get leads? Put up an iPad mini. Put your business card in for the iPad mini. So here's the plus and minus to that, right? Here's how you use the iPad mini. Again, it's customer acquisition. If it's worth spending $300 to get somebody who's going to spend more than $300, spend the money because you're going to get it back. But don't do a random drawing because that's stupid. So what random drawings are at trade shows, if you don't know this, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, the tooth fairy isn't real either, is you take the cards after you're done and you sift through to the companies that you really want to work with. And then you throw all the other things out, and then you do a random drawing for what you want. If you don't say you're doing a random drawing, then you just randomly draw your best lead. Oh, look, Genentech. How did that happen? Magical. Well, here's your iPad. I'm going to deliver it next week when I come and see you. Nobody's going to not take a meeting when you're delivering a $300 piece of electronics to them. You're in. We actually got a $15,000 contract out of giving away an iPod a few years ago. So the corollary to that, of course, is if somebody has something really cool and you're not a customer, don't bother. They're not going to pick you. They're going to sift you out. Now, I'd like to tell you that I was smart enough to know this all in advance. The first trade show I went with my friend Ian, who had given a presentation at one of these a long time ago. I saw him pulling the cards out and sifting. He was like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm not giving this to our competitors or the students. And it was like, the tooth fairy wasn't real. I just sobbed in the corner. Like, I can't believe it. It's not fair. The game's rigged. So just with a couple minutes, thinking about travel and airlines. TripIt's great at managing itineraries. Uber, if you haven't used Uber, Uber is transformative. If you're in a place, you need a taxi, you press a button, a taxi shows up. It's magic. Use public transit a lot, as I used to do to save money. Metro is good. Again, we'll post these slides. For airlines, so yes, airlines are expensive. Most airlines have a corporate program that kind of doubles the rewards. So you get frequent flyer miles, great. But they actually have a corporate program you can sign up for. So your flight gets personal miles and corporate miles too. So Delta has Sky Miles and the Sky Bonus program. They don't talk about it, but if you ask them for their corporate frequent flyer program, there's a lot of them out there. So Kayak is great. Kayak is probably the best search engine for airfare. It's better than your airline's airfare because, believe it or not, when you search for a plane on I use Delta almost always. Strangely enough, they don't give you the cheapest fare all the time. They give you the flights that they want you to take because that plane might not be as full. Kayak will search their entire itinerary and give you the flights. So I can't count the number of times I've searched on Delta and been like, why is this flight $596? That's ridiculous. And go to Kayak, and there it is for $223 because it was 5 minutes before the search parameters that I put in, and so Delta won't help you. In one case, they were hiding the flight completely. It was only when I went in and selected the outbound flight and selected the inbound flight manually that the cheap fare came up. But Kayak finds that for you. You fly a lot and you don't use Seat Guru, I'm very sorry. It actually gives you the quality of the seat. Does the seat back recline? Is there a plug? Is there a USB port? Is the seat width narrower? Does it have a fixed back? So especially you're going on a long haul flight and you want to make sure you have a decent seat, I think it's awesome. Hotwire tells you the quality of the hotel and usually saves 40 to 60% on hotels, 70% on cars. I'm not a spokesperson. I mean, I went back through our accounts for 2 years because my funding backer was questioning our expenses. And so I went back and I looked at my Hotwire receipts and estimated, just based on what they said, that we had saved $25,000 that year by using Hotwire. So a lot of times, budget will be $68 a day. Hotwire is $14.95. There's just easy way to save a bunch of money. Hotel Tonight, another one. You only book afternoon and local time. So it's really they know they haven't sold the room and you need a room, so they'll do it. Very cheap. Airbnb is good, especially internationally.
What was the local time
Meaning if I'm here and it's noon in Durham and I'm flying to San Francisco today, I have to wait till it's noon in San Francisco to get it. But again, there you'll find, and they'll actually tell you the hotel. So you could stay, I've seen in San Francisco, you stay at the Westin and it'll be $130 instead of $390. Save a bunch of money. So we talked about this in the end. I think now, it was a little different a couple years ago, but now I do think it's important to figure out what the ecosystem is you're going to be. You're either going to mix and match, you want flexibility, you want whatever it is you want, or it's really Apple, Microsoft, and Google. Figure out what you're going to use the most and stick with it, because the integration of all these different tools saves you even more money. And then the last thing is just, so let's say you actually raise some money and it's somebody else's. Just spend it like it's your own, because in the end, if you run out of it, it is your money because you're not getting paid. So a lot of outsourcing until you can afford to bring it in-house. And if you have to develop something that costs more than 20 grand, you should first look at grants, SBIRs, STTRs, any kind of federal programs, because it's non-dilutive cash. And only after that, see if you want to raise some venture. So since I'm in New Hampshire, right, it's live cheap or die. So that's it. Thank you.